The second episode of the Jonez Report. Today I'll bring you a few stories about our wonderful Senator John McCain. Jumping right in. Pretty interesting story. It took place a while back. It's about the Keating Five. And if you're not familiar with that, I will give you a brief overview. Apparently, the Keating Five consists of 5 senators. Alan Cranston, Democrat, Dennis DeConcini, Democrat, John Glenn, Democrat, John McCain, Republican, and Donald Regal, Democrat. It's already disconcerting to me to see that John McCain has been allied with Democrats since the 1980s. Kind of funny. Moving on. These 5 senators were accused of intervening improperly in 1987 on behalf of Charles Keating, at which time he was the chairman of Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, which was target of the regulatory investigation by the Federal Home Loan Bank. Subsequently, in 1989, his company collapsed at a cost of over $3 billion to the federal government, and 23,000 Lincoln bondholders were defrauded, and many investors lost their life savings. After a lengthy investigation, the Senate's Ethics Committee determined in 1981 that Cranston, DeConcini, and Regal had substantially and improperly interfered with the FHLBB's investigation. Now, if you're not familiar with that, that's the Federal Home Loan Bank Board. And they improperly interfered with the investigations of Lincoln Savings, with Cranston receiving a formal reprimand. Senator John Glenn, and John McCain were cleared of having acted improperly, but were criticized for exercised poor judgment. Now, I find it very interesting that John McCain is caught up in a scandal that caused the chairman of a company to literally go to prison for 5 years, and he was surrounded by nothing but Democrats. But I digress. The loan crisis of the 80s and 90s was the failure of 747 savings and loan associations. The ultimate cost of the crisis totaled $160 billion, but the government covered $124.6 billion. This slowdown is to said have cost over 800,000 less homes were constructed due to this particular crisis. At the time, that was the lowest rate since World War II. The Keating Five scandal was prompted, like I said, by Lincoln Saving and Loan Association of Irvine, California. Kind of funny. The chairman of Lincoln was Charles Keating. Now, the corruption allegations, this goes pretty deep. So, it involves a man named Edwin J. Gray. He was chair of the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, and he feared that the savings industry risky investment practices were exposing the government to a very, very large burden. And he instituted new policies where savings associations could hold no more than 10% of their assets in direct investment, and were thus prohibited from taking ownership positions in certain financial entities and instruments. At that particular time, Lincoln had become burdened with bad debt, resulting from its past aggressiveness. And by early 1986, its investment practices were being investigated and audited by the FHLBB. Earlier, Keating took a few measures to oppose Gray and FHLBB, including recruiting a study from then non-private economist Alan Greenspan, saying that direct investments were not harmful, and getting President Reagan to make a recess appointment of a Keating ally. The Senate had changed control from Republican to Democrat during the 1986 congressional election, placing several Democratic senators in key positions. And starting in January of 1987, Keating's staff was putting pressure on Cranston to remove Gray from the FHLBB discussion regarding Lincoln. This is really an interesting, fascinating, very deep story. I'm gonna move on past the corruption part and get to the relationships of the senators to this mystery man named Keating. Cranston, also known as Alan Cranston, Democrat, he received $39,000 from Keating and his associates for his 1986 Senate re-election. Furthermore, Keating donated some $850,000 to assorted groups founded by Cranston or controlled by him. DeConcini had received $48,000 from Keating and his associates for his 1988 Senate re-election campaign. And in September '89, after the government sued Keating and American Continental for improper actions regarding contributions, DeConcini returned the money. DeConcini considered Keating a constituent because Keating lived in Arizona. John Glenn had received $34,000 in direct contributions from Keating and his associates for his 1984 presidential nomination campaign, and a political action committee tied to Glenn had received an additional $200,000. Glenn considered Keating a constituent because one of Keating's other businesses concerns was headquartered in Ohio. And now we get to John McCain. McCain and Keating had become personal friends following their initial contact contacts in 1981. McCain was only one of five with close social and personal ties. Like DeConcini, McCain considered Keating a constituent. Funny, every one of these people considered Keating a constituent since he lived in Arizona. Between 1982 and 1987, McCain had received $112,000 in political contributions from Keating and his associates. In addition, McCain's wife Cindy McCain and her father Jim Hensley had invested $359,000 in the Fountain Square project, a Keating shopping center. In April of 1986, a year before McCain met with the regulators, McCain and his family and their babysitter had made 9 trips at Keating expense, sometimes aboard Keating's jet. 3 of those trips were made during vacations to Keating's Bahamas retreat at Cat Cay. McCain did not pay Keating in the amount of $13,433 for some of the trips until years after they were taken, when he learned that Keating was in trouble over Lincoln. Wow. And last but not least, Regal had received $76,000 from Keating and his associates for his 1988 Senate re-election campaign. Now, mind you, everyone in this story is a Democrat besides John McCain. And then we get to the Senate Ethics Committee investigations and findings. The Senate Ethics Committee investigation began on November 17th in 1989. It focused on all 5 senators and lasted 22 months. 3 Republican senators and a Washington attorney named Robert Bennett was appointed as a special outside counsel to the committee. Initially, the committee investigated in private on September 10th, but after that decision, they decided to take action against 3 of the 5, which would have been Cranston, DeConcini, and Regal, but took no action against Glenn and John McCain. Now, I know that was kind of a shoddy, rough overview, but I'm going to put a few articles in the bottom of this that you can actually read and get more in depth. But pretty much from what it seems like to me, this story is about John McCain grouping with the chairman of a financial institution and basically being an accomplice to corruption, which is kind of cute now that he's trying to call out our current president, whether you agree with him or disagree with him on his corruption, after this man has 10, 12-page documents out there about his particular role in the Keating Five. Although he wasn't really charged with anything, but to me personally, as someone who's an independent thinker, it's kind of interesting to me to see a Republican caught up in a whole bunch of corruption with 4 other Democrats, although John Glenn didn't get charged with anything. To me, it's very, very, very interesting. So moving on from that story, I bring another beauty to you. This story is a few years down the road, but it's 2008. If I'm not mistaken, he was running for president at that particular time against the one who will not be named. Thank God he's out of office. But according to this article, John McCain is accused of accepting improper donations from the Rothschilds. Now, this is an accusation that's followed up by circumstantial evidence. It's not really anything, but it's kind of lighting the light bulb in my brain that's connecting the dots. So, according to a U.S. campaign watchdog, they accused John McCain of violating election laws by accepting campaign contributions from 2 prominent Londoners. At a fundraising luncheon held at London's Spencer House during John McCain's trip to the United Kingdom, the invitation list had Lord Rothschild and Nathaniel Rothschild as hosts and indicated the event was made possible with their kind permission. Wow. Like I said, again, that's circumstantial, but just to even be considered to have ties with the Rothschilds and then sit around and virtue signal about getting tough on this person and starting an investigation into this and to that, it's kind of interesting to me. Not to mention, when you put the Keating report, which he was definitely connected to, then you connect it to this, where he's accused of accepting improper donations from the Rothschilds. And then, later in 2008, we get some news that was recently gotten for us by WikiLeaks. John McCain, September 29, 2008. I'll read you this, the first page of this letter. The choice, dear friend, the choice America will face on November 4th is very clear. It will be the choice between one of the most liberal governments in modern history or a government dedicated to upholding long-held conservative principles of limited government, strong national defense, and individual freedom. And if I've learned anything these past months traveling across America, listening to our citizens of this great nation, it is this. Victory will only come when the Republicans unite around our core principles. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, he said that to Vitaly Churkin, 136 East 67th Street, New York. Entailed in this package was a document that was labeled contribution options. Enclose a personal check payable to the McCain-Palin victory. So literally, John McCain wrote a letter to some people in the Russian government and has the audacity to sit here and accuse our current president of being connected to Russia. I find this actually quite funny. This was sent back on 20 October of 2008. Permanent mission of the Russian Federation of the United Nations on fundraising letter from John McCain election campaign. We have received a letter from Senator John McCain requesting financial contributions to his presidential campaign. Boom! John McCain should be investigated for his goddamn ties to Russia instead of trying to project his own bullshit on other people. But I'll digress and finish this letter. In this connection, we would like to reiterate that Russian official, the permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the United States or the Russian government do not finance political activity in foreign country. So all of a sudden, John McCain is accusing everybody else of being involved with Russia, and it turns out his old ass is actually the one who is involved with Russia. And for my final piece of anecdotal evidence, or whatever you want to call it, or should we say a journey into his past, this one is actually from this year, if I'm not mistaken. McCain had to admit leaking of Trump dossier was totally wrong. So John McCain leaked an unverified dossier claiming the Russians had compromising information about Donald Trump. That is awfully fascinating. After in 2008, I've just laid out the evidence to show you that John McCain sent a letter to the Russian Federation of the United Nations asking for presidential campaign donations from the Russians. And then he leaks an unverified dossier to the FBI about the current president because he's jealous that he got his ass whooped by Barack Obama. McCain is a war hawk, and there's nothing else to say besides that. What kind of a principled so-called conservative leaks a dossier on the president and then first tries to come out and say, I felt this information was so important that I had to get it out, and then has to walk back his own statements because it was an unverified accusatory document? I mean, this guy John McCain is so far off in left field. I don't know how the hell he keeps getting reelected. He shouldn't even be allowed to be the damn dog catcher of the poorest city in America. He shouldn't even be allowed to be let into any political hearing. This man is the epitome of a liar, someone who bends the truth, someone who will throw somebody under the bus to hide up his own past accusations. I mean, this is stuff the Keating report was really hard for me to go through. I mean, I wasn't even alive at this particular moment in time that this was going on. So this is new to people like me who are just now, experimenting in politics. We're starting to see that, he was linked up with 5 Democrats and he's still doing the same thing. He's becoming an ally to the Democratic Party now. It's starting to make me believe that John McCain was an ally to the Democratic Party this entire time. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, like, and share. I'm trying to be the bastion of truth. I'm trying to put out information that you can absorb, take my sources, cross-check it, and let me know what you guys find. Thank you for listening.